What is happening, fishing friends? Welcome to another episode of DEBO'S Fishing. Now, do you ever get a new reel, get it all spooled up and look down and it looks like that? Why is it all bunched up on that right side? Well, as Martha would not say, that's not a good thing. So if you find yourself in that situation, you just got your brand new reel spooled up and it's all bunched up on one side, I have good news and bad news. The good news is I know a few common items to troubleshoot to fix this. The bad news is you got to take all the line off your reel. So the first thing we'll be checking is the worm gear and pawl. And if you flip your reel over and look up here at the front, your line guide is right up here. Line comes through there. This moves back and forth. So as you reel, moves that left to right and evenly spools the line onto your spool. Now if you look up here, this is your worm gear. It's got a series of cuts in it going opposite directions. There's a pawl gear in here. The pawl is what fits down inside there and moves left to right. So the first thing you want to check, if you have a reel that you've been using for a while, check on here to make sure there's not any sort of moss or scum or anything stuck up on these sides that's not allowing that to go all the way over to the left or right side. If there's something there blocking it, you might have an uneven spool. So if you've looked on both sides of your baitcaster, the left and right side, and there's nothing there blocking it, look at it from the front and slowly turn it. If it gets to the left or right hand side and as you are turning it, it gets there and it stalls, then you'll know you've either got a worn out pawl or a worn out worm gear. So you want to look at replacing both of those. And it's not that hard. So once you've checked over that worm gear and pawl and you're sure that nothing is damaged there, you just want to make sure that you put a good layer of grease on that. Just a nice thin layer to ensure that that pawl and that line guide is going to move back and forth nice and freely. So once you've got all that done, it's time to put line on here. Now there are three main issues that I see new anglers running into when they go to put line on here. Number one, the first thing is tying the knot, the initial knot. Make sure that when you tie your knot, it's in the middle of the spool. Now this is the new Cast King Spartacus, and this spool, as you can hear, my thumb right there, it's got a groove, a little channel cut in the middle of that spool. So you're able to ensure that the knot, when you actually tie it onto the spool, is right in the middle of it. So that's the first knot. Now the second knot, if you're like me, you'll have a knot going from your backing to your leader, your actual main line. So when I spool this up, I'll usually get to this kind of this flat part right here on the side of my spool, fill it up with backing to there. The rest of the way up, I'm going to go with my main line. Now this is going to be on my medium heavy setup, my moving baits. I've got it on a 7'1" medium heavy. So I'm going to go with the 17-pound copolymer on here, Fluorocoat. So you want to make sure when you tie that knot, that leader knot, if you have to, take your drag all the way down. Your line guide is only going to move when you spin your handle. The spool is not going to move. You want to make sure that your line guide is in the middle and you tie your leader connection knot just like that. So that way when you start to spool the rest of your line on, everything is nice and even and lined up. You don't want to have your initial knot off to one side. You don't want to have your main line to your backing knot off to one side. That can screw all this up. So that's number one thing. Make sure your knots are in the center. Now to get to items 2 and 3, we have to get this reel on a rod, just like that. But now that we've got the reel on the rod, we have to get some line tied to this. I think we can fix that. That was easy. So now that we've got the line tied up onto our spool, it is time to get spooling. So all I'm going to do is grab the line here and start turning it. Oh, hold on. That's the first issue I see. Now, if you watched my Bass Fishing for Beginners combo video where we talked about getting this all set up with line and everything, and I'll link that up here, I talked about making sure that when you put your line on, you at least go through the first guide on your rod. Now you can go all the way through all the guides to the very end if you want, but at least go through that first one, because one issue I see with new anglers when they go to spool up a reel is they'll do this. They don't put it through any of the guides on the rod and they'll hold it here. And when you're holding the line off to the right-hand side, it's going to put more line over here to the right. So it's all going to bunch up over here on this side. So don't do that. So that was easy enough. We got the line put through the first guide of our rod there. So we are ready to go. So I'm going to start putting this on. Now I'm going to hold it nice and tight against my rod here. So that way it's, oh yeah, it's actually the second issue that I see. Holding the line too tight in front of the reel. Some people will even get a glove or a towel or push it real tight against their rod here and hold it right in front of the reel and spool it real tight to say, well, I want to get a good hard tight pack on it. What happens is when people hold it real tight in front of the reel here, it doesn't allow that line guide to move nice and free back and forth. And oftentimes when you see people do this, there'll be just a little bit of a gap on the left and right hand side. Or some people will hold it real close down to one side and it bunches up. But again, don't hold it off to the side. Don't hold your line super tight down in front of the reel. You really shouldn't even need to hold the line tight. If you went through the first guide of your rod like this, I put a little tension on the spool, on the actual line spool down here. Let me show you. Yes, here's my highly scientific setup. No, this is not a 5th grade science project. This is my line spooling station. This is just what Bass Pro uses. I actually modeled their copy. A simple cardboard box with a chopstick through it, and my big spool of line. This is the cheap stuff that I got from Walmart for like $2, 700 yards, something like that. I put the chopstick through so this line spool just barely touches the side. So when I go to pull the line off this and actually start spooling it onto my reel, there's just enough tension at the spool here to ensure I get a good solid pack on my reel. Let's go back to that. That was easy enough. Now that we have this all set up and ready to go, I've got my handy dandy spooling station up there, run through the first guide of my rod. I don't have to hold anything. Again, I don't want to hold it real tight here. See a lot of people doing that. I don't want to hold it off to the side. I'm just going to palm my reel and reel the normal way that I would when I'm reeling in a lure. Now, y'all don't want to see me do this in real time, so we'll speed it up. So there you have it. As long as you follow those 3 guidelines. Number 1, make sure you keep your knot in the middle of your spool. Number 2, make sure you don't hold your line off to the side when you're spooling it. Number 3, make sure you don't hold your line super tight, and especially not extremely tight right in front of the reel. Just let the spool and the rod do the work for you. As long as you follow those, you should have a nice even spool just like that every time. Now let me know in the comments below, have you ever ran into an issue like this? If so, I hope these help you. So you know what? Until next time. And I'll never be a millionaire. Whoa, boom, boom, and zoom. I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in love. I don't care. When you're ready.